Okay, let's get going on World War II. Our topic today is World War II. We're going to mainly talk about the things leading up to it today, and try to go through a few slides. I'm only going to do about 25 or 30 minutes or so you can relax. It's not going to be a problem. We actually have our Zoom conference here in just a few moments, so at least I have something I have to get done, and that's going to make me in at the right time. But at any rate, here are our key concepts that we're looking at. We're looking at with the United States, of course, our expansion of our economy. But while we have instability, we're coming off the Great Depression, Roaring '20s, Great Depression, then the New Deal. Innovations in communication and technology. You can look at that. Gosh, just look over the last 100 years, all the advancement in communication that we've had, technology that we've had. It's really an amazing thing. Migration patterns, people moving from the rural areas into the urban areas. And then, of course, this one here, which is going to deal mainly with World War II, is America's involvement in global conflicts. Now keep in mind, you can go all the way back to Washington's farewell address, where he says, do not get involved in foreign alliances, except for trade, foreign affairs, and things like that. And we're going to try to do that. It just, what happens is, global economy, ships being able to go across the ocean. We're eventually going to have planes be able to go across. That's not that big a deal right now. But George did not have to worry about the things that FDR is going to have to worry about. So that's going to make a huge difference. So we're looking at causes of World War II. There's a lot of different causes, but we're going to focus on these four. One, the Treaty of Versailles. And of course, those two kind of go hand in hand. So the Treaty of Versailles, as we've mentioned in our last unit, is just such a heinous treaty. It is not a treaty of peace. It is a treaty of revenge. It is a treaty of payback, so to speak, and it is going to really, really hurt Germany. And so, it's one of those things, and I do think the world has learned from that as things have happened throughout the world since then. They have done things a lot differently when they've come in and taken over. Now, I will say this, when World War II is over, we don't have the Treaty of Versailles, but we actually split up a country. We take Germany and we split it up. So that's not very good either, but that's okay. Hitler's actions, both Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito, who we talked about last week in our Zoom session. But Hitler mainly is going to, I'm not saying his actions were because of the Treaty of Versailles, but the Treaty of Versailles allowed his actions to take place. The people of Germany are looking for a hero. Where's my hero at? Because the Treaty of Versailles has treated them so badly, they're looking for a hero. That hero is going to be Hitler. And he's going to be able to come to power. Whereas if the economy had been good, the government had been able to be strong, who knows, Hitler may not have been able to come to power. Same thing is going to happen with Mussolini. Same thing is going to happen down in Italy. Now, Japan's a little bit different. Hirohito is the family emperor. It's hereditary. So he's not coming to power because of what's happened in Japan. But what happens is Japan realizes that it needs things from others. And the closest country to it is China. So it's going to invade China and try to take over some of the lands there. The failure of appeasement, we'll talk about that today. Appeasement means giving in to someone. When you let them have their way, they hammer on you all the time. And you're also worried about what they could do if you don't give in to them. And so you give in to them. You try to find a compromise which is weighed more on their end, but you're hoping that something bigger doesn't happen. We're going to find out that this appeasement does nothing more than allow Germany to have more time to do even more heinous activities. And then the failure of the League of Nations. We realize the League of Nations is going to be weak. not gonna be able to do anything. It's a little bit like the Articles of Confederation. And you know, if you look at that, Articles of Confederation, and I always say this, something that's the first time, a lot of times is the weakest part, because you didn't see what it needed. So the Articles of Confederation didn't work for us, the League of Nations didn't work for the world. United Nations, a little bit better, I wouldn't say great, but a little bit better. Constitution, better than the Articles of Confederation. So let's once again talk about the Treaty of Versailles. Signed in 1919, the Big Four demanded Germany take blame for the war, even though really they didn't. You know, it starts by these alliances, but they must come out and say they started the war, and then they have to pay reparations of $33 billion, which is not a lot today, but in those times, that's a ton of money. And then, of course, the restrict rearmament, how they could not have any submarines, limited tonnage in the Navy, limited Army, factories are shut down that supplied military munitions. And so, of course, the Germans are going to resent this. Because of all the military factories being shut down, it's going to create an economic problem for them. It is going to lead to their Great Depression, which is going to be in the 20s. And then it's going to allow Hitler and his Nazi party, also known as the brown shirts. Now keep that in mind. Hitler, Nazis, brown shirts. Mussolini has the black shirts. And of course, Hirohito didn't have to rise to power. He was already there. But it's going to allow them to gain power. Now look at this. This gives you an example. So in 1923, the middle of their Great Depression in Germany, $1, one American dollar, equaled 1 trillion marks. The marks is the German dollar. Now think about that. So if you went over there with an American dollar, it was worth 1 trillion marks. Really what that shows you is just how worthless the mark was. And there we go. So if you see here, this is a mark. And what people eventually started doing, using it as fireplace starters, wallpaper. They would do anything with it. It was worthless as currency. And so that was going to be the problem they were going to run into. So as we look at this, eventually this is what's going to happen. Now this is kind of down the road. If you look, this is 1942, 42 through 44. So when we look at this, eventually these are the Axis powers. The Axis is Germany, Italy, Japan. They are going to control all this land. Here's Germany. That's what's left of Austria-Hungary. They separate those two countries. Hitler's going to get those back. There's Italy there. And then, of course, they come into Africa. If you think back to your world history days, remember how Italy had a lot to do with northern Africa. So that stands to reason. They're going into Africa. One of the reasons they're going into Africa are the resources down in Africa. They need those resources. If you look here, they've gone into the Soviet Union. Now the Soviet Union goes forever there. But you still look, they've gone into the Soviet Union. They've gone in and taken over Poland. That's going to be a huge thing. One of the things, I'll mention this down the road, when we talk about the Holocaust. I truly believe the German people did not know, when I say German people, people like me living in Germany, did not know the extent of the Holocaust because most of the concentration camps were in Poland. They were not in Germany. They were in Poland. Most of them. Are there some in Germany? Yes. But most of the concentration camps are in Poland. Because Germany has gone in. You look here. Germany has invaded France again. Belgium again. You look up here, the Netherlands, Denmark. All this here is going to be under Axis control. All right, now some of these countries have, like Finland, to be honest, Finland's going to join the Axis because they've always had issues with the Soviet Union. They're going to join the Soviet Union. Spain is neutral in the fact that it's had its own little revolution, so it kind of stays neutral. It's not involved in the war an awful lot. And then if you look over here, Ireland is neutral to some degree. Of course, remember, Ireland is fighting for its independence from Great Britain, so they're having issues there. All right, so we have Adolf Hitler, the Nazi dictator of Germany, responsible for the Holocaust. He considers his government the Third Reich. Third Reich is the third great government of Germany. That's where he gets it from. Germany has had two other great periods of time where they were like the greatest thing in the world. So he calls this the Third Reich, the third time Germany's going to be great. He's looking at this as the best, the one to end all of them. And of course, we all know the swastika is the symbol for his political party, the brown shirts, the Nazis. Now, keep in mind, this actually, he borrows a lot of this stuff from Rome. Rome has used this, a lot of things, the salute, Heil Hitler, that comes from Rome. Think back to the Roman Colosseum, the emperor would be up there, and then the two gladiators would stand before the emperor, and they would salute him. We salute you before we begin fighting. And so that would take place. This is also an offshoot of Buddhism. Doesn't look exactly like this, but that's kind of where Hitler gets it from. He borrows a lot of stuff, gets a ton from Rome though. All right, in Italy we have Benito Mussolini called Il Duce. This is an I and then an L. Probably should have done a different font. But it's the I-L Duce, D-U-C-E, Duce. He is a fascist dictator. We talked about fascism the other day briefly. But a political philosophy where the citizen submits to the will of the ruler, of the state, whoever's in charge, not the will of the individual themselves. What is in their mind, in a perfect fascism, what is best for the country? That's what they're looking at. And of course, it is centered on a dictator. You have one person who is in charge. That's the dictator. All right? Started by Mussolini. Hitler's going to use it. Both of them are fascists. And today, whenever you have protesters and they think the federal government's being too involved, telling them what to do, they will accuse them of being fascist. Because the dictators said we're going to do this without the concern of the people. So if you look, there is Mussolini, and then there's Hitler. That's in their heyday. Things are going well for them. And they think everything is great. So over in Spain, this is why Spain is not involved, they have a little civil war over there, 1936 to 39, and they put in Franco, who is going to be the dictator to some degree, not as much as Hitler and Mussolini, but the dictator of Spain. And there's always questions of, did Hitler and Mussolini have something to do with him being put into power? So, what is appeasement? That's one of the things we're talking about today. So, Germany, all these things are taking place in Germany, Italy, and Japan. They are invading places. Germany is invading Europe, Japan is invading China, Manchuria, and Italy is invading Northern Africa. Keep those things in mind. So Great Britain and France do not want to fight. Keep in mind, it has not been but a few years since we've had World War I. Many people, let's take that back. A lot of the officers in World War II fought in World War I. Many of the officers. Hitler was in World War I. Remember I showed you that picture? He was a corporal in World War I. So that does take place. Do you have some regular soldiers? Yeah, you do. But generally, if you fought in World War I and you're in World War II now, you're probably an officer because you're older and stuff. But anyhow, they don't want to fight. Now, the whole thing behind Hitler is, and I'll go back, is this here. When the end of World War I, what they do is they take some land from Germany, they split up Austria-Hungary, make it Austria and Hungary, and they divide all these little, they get in all these little countries. They're called buffer nations, buffer zones, buffer states, anything that starts with buffer. The Soviet Union wants that so that they have a buffer between any German invasion again. Well, Hitler, one of the things he wants to do is to take those lands back. He wants to take them back because they were, in his mind, originally Germany's. So what he is going to start doing is invading these lands. And his rationale, his justification, is that they were Germany's to begin with. We should have them back. And so when that takes place, Great Britain, Prime Minister Chamberlain is going to come over, and they're going to sign what's called the Munich Pact. Now, let me just tell you, you need to know, there are going to be a couple of pacts you need to know. This is one of them, the Munich Pact. And basically what they're going to say is, Hitler, we're going to let you keep the lands that you've just invaded, as long as you agree not to invade any other lands. He agrees to it. Unfortunately, he does not honor it. That's going to be the problem. But this is called appeasement. When you give in to someone, Hitler demands these lands that he has already invaded. And here's the just tragic thing, is that those armies of those little countries stood no chance of fighting the Germans, because the German army had been built up so much by Hitler. And so they just come in and annihilate them. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then, of course, over the Atlantic Ocean is the United States, who has sat back into a lazy boy reclining chair of isolationism. We don't want to be involved. We want to be isolated. We want to trade, but we don't want to get involved in these alliances. Remember, that's why we didn't sign the 14 points. We didn't adopt it because of Article 10, which meant you had to have alliances. So we don't do that. So if you look here, this is the political cartoon you'll see. And of course you've got Europe over there, they're bloodletting, trying to figure out what they're doing. And of course Uncle Sam says you can continue your archaic remedy of invading, appeasement, all that stuff, but don't depend on me for another transfusion. That same thing you used to do of invading each other, alliances, that same old remedy that you did. Don't look for us to come over and help out. So as you look at it, you got America down here, you got the Atlantic Ocean, over here is Europe. All right? This is one of the crazy things, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, 1928. It is a, gosh, what would you even call it besides a pact? I'm trying to think if there's another way to call it something. But anyhow, it's an agreement that says it's going to outlaw war. It's going to outlaw war. And so we do have 60 nations that sign it. But here's the thing, Germany doesn't sign it. Japan doesn't sign it. Italy doesn't sign it. And so here's the deal. Unless you have the aggressors sign this, it's not going to work. It's going to be ineffective. So I don't even know why they want you to know this, but they do. But I guess it does show how some people are trying to be peaceful, but then you have that group of folks who don't, and if they don't want to be peaceful, it's not going to work out very well. All right? So, if you look here, here's Germany, Austria, Hungary's over here. But what's going to happen is, and keep in mind now, Hitler is originally from Austria. You know, Hitler talks about the pure German, German-born, blonde-haired, blue-eyes guy, which Hitler is none. He's born in Austria, comes over to Germany. You know, we always talk about why does he not like Jews? We don't know for sure. There's all the things that, you know, we do know that his dad was Jewish, but he was an absent dad. He left. And so it could have been where he didn't like his dad, and he was a Jew, so we'll take it on Jews. There's the theory that there was a girl who was Jewish that he liked, and she dissed him. There was, Hitler was an artist. There was an art teacher that was Jewish that criticized him. All of those things could be. But you know, one of the things to look at too is that Jews throughout history have been persecuted, so Hitler's not the first one to do that. And people would blame Jews for the wrongs of their country. And part of that was just how they were different. It goes all the way back in your world history. I'm sure you learned that there's a time where the Christian church did not allow Christians to loan out money to people. People still wanted loans. So of course the Jews had money and didn't have an edict not to loan out money. They didn't have to go by the Pope or the Christian leaders. So they loaned out money. Well, of course, some people then are going to default on their loans. They have to be foreclosed on it. They blame the Jews because the Jewish people run the banks at the time. That's you know, all those things, we don't know. But at any rate, Germany unites with Austria in March 1938, and so that's going to take place, and then from there, Hitler is going to start invading. So this is the Munich Pact. Neville Chamberlain is the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and of course, what they're doing now is they're going into Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic. Okay, that's where they're going into next. And of course, that's one of those buffer states. That land at one time had been part of Germany. And so what they do, can you imagine this? They tell Hitler that he can keep that part of Czechoslovakia he's already invaded, as long as he doesn't invade any more land. So think about this. Think about if someone invaded America, and they invaded the East Coast, and so they've got, you know, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. And the federal government goes in and says, okay, you know what? We're going to let you keep those states. Just don't invade anymore. How do the people living in those states feel? They feel their country's turned their back on them. Europe here turns its back on Czechoslovakia. It is going to let Hitler keep it. But, you know, the problem is no one had an answer for Germany at this time. No one has built up their military the way Hitler did. You know, what happens, like Great Britain, for example, it had all this machinery from World War I. Well, they just keep that and they think that's going to be the great thing. Can you imagine fighting a German Panzer or Tiger tank with a World War I tank? I mean, crazy. It's going to blow it away. And we'll talk about that down the road. So at any rate, Hitler's going to violate this agreement. You look at this political cartoon, and you've got Germany depicted as the wolf, and then here the European people are just giving them land on a plate. They're giving them land on the plate. So this is Neville Chamberlain, this is Hitler. Chamberlain actually goes to, and I think they meet in Berlin. No, I'm sorry, Munich, Germany. That's what's called the Munich Pact. That a brain freeze there. But he goes to Germany to meet with Hitler. And if you look, there's Hitler, Mussolini, there's Chamberlain. Mussolini looks like he's ready to kill somebody. But at any rate, the Munich Agreement is all in favor of Germany. And right now, you can see they're taking this picture. Chamberlain is relieved. Hitler knows he has lied. He knows he's lied. And that's the crazy thing. So the other thing that starts to happen is the Sudetenland, which is right around Germany as well, is ceded to Germany. This part here, which, as we said, at one time was part of Germany. And so that's the justification. This is part of Czechoslovakia they're not going to get yet, but they are. And then, of course, Poland's going to be a whole other thing. Poland is the biggest territory between Germany and Russia. And we'll talk about that. So look here. Here's Germany. There's the Czech Republic. There's Austria. There's Poland. Russia's going to be over here. Okay? Right there's Munich. So they fly into Munich. And they do this deal. uh, Chamberlain comes back, he lands there in London, and this is one of the craziest things, probably should have had you listen to it, but he makes this announcement, he's got this paper, this is the Munich Pact, which is signed, and he says something like, "I have met Herr Hitler, and I think he is a man we can do business with." He really thinks that he has stopped another world war. He feels good about himself, relieved. I don't think he's real confident. He's relieved of it. But he is here talking all, and they're cheering for him. They're cheering and clapping because they have stopped Germany from invading. Little do they know, at this time, as he is speaking, Hitler is planning his next invasion, or the continued invasion of Czechoslovakia. All right, so there's Germany, there's that Sudetenland that he's already gone in and taken over. So, of course, the leader of Great Britain at the time, well, later on, of course, Neville Chamberlain is the prime minister. He is ousted. They do elections for prime minister, and what they do is a little bit different. So they don't vote for the prime minister. It's a little bit like our Speaker of the House. In their parliament, whichever political party is in charge picks the prime minister. So it's not like as much our president as our House of Representatives or Speaker of the House. So when all this takes place, there's a shifting of political ideologies, and Winston Churchill comes to power. An interesting thing that I've always found is, excuse me, Churchill leads them through World War II, does a great thing. And then lo and behold, after World War II, the parties shift again, and Churchill's ousted as prime minister. But then years later, there's another shift, they bring Churchill back. Parliament in England is crazy. But he is critical of the policy of appeasement. And so he's going to eventually become prime minister later on. But the appeasement is in there under Neville Chamberlain. Of course, we have Stalin over in Russia, the communist dictator of Russia. And he's going to be throughout World War II. Keep in mind, here's the funny thing. Not funny, interesting. So Stalin is the dictator of Russia. At the beginning of war, you're going to have Churchill, you're going to have FDR. And then, of course, Stalin outlasts them all. FDR is going to pass away. And then Churchill, his party is going to be ousted, and so he's no longer prime minister. It is Stalin that is there from the beginning to the end of World War II. So one of the interesting things that we should have saw again, here's what's taking place. By this time we realize that Hitler is not going to observe or adhere to the Munich Pact. So now Hitler and Stalin come up with a pact, and it's called the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. Now let me just tell you, wake up, if you're asleep, you got to write this down. This is super important. Because here's what happens. In this agreement, Soviet Union and Germany agree that they will not attack each other. And they agree that they will each attack Poland and split it up. So both of them, now think about this, Great Britain is here, Soviet Union is here, Poland's in between. So you're getting attacked by the Soviet Union in Germany, oh my gosh. I mean, it's terrible. And they agree not to attack each other. Now, a lot of historians believe this, I'm one of those, that this was Hitler's big mistake. Not the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, but when he breaks it down the road. He is, invading France. He's going towards Great Britain. He's going towards other European countries. And everything is going one way. All your supply lines, all your men go one way. And what happens is that when he begins to invade Soviet Union later on, now he is splitting things in half. Half's going this way, half's going this way. And that's going to hurt him. I think that's what's going to really be bad for him. But right now, It is good for Germany, good for Soviet Union. Boy, it lets France, England, Belgium, all those guys know you're in trouble. Because now they know if war breaks out, we do not have the Soviet Union to help us. So if you look here, there's Germany, as I said, there's Poland, and there's the Soviet Union. Okay? This is 1935 to 39. 1940 is not got here yet, so France is still safe. But of course, just like in World War I, Germany's going to go through Belgium and come this way. And the reason they do that this time is France has devised a defensive line here called the Maginot Line, which is concrete bunkers with cannons and machine guns. But the problem is everything is facing towards Germany. And so when the Germans come in and come around, they can't even turn their guns around. The other thing Germany's going to do is paratroopers. They're going to fly over them, drop troops behind them, and come in from behind. If you look here, this is Poland's army. So Germany is rolling in with Panzer tanks, machine guns, motorcycles, trucks, airplanes, and the Polish army has spears and horses. Warfare has changed. Hitler has changed with it, but not the Poles. This is a political cartoon that I think sums it up great, because it talks about who your bedfellows. And of course, you have Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia are in together, and there's Poland, Little Red Riding Hood. And she did not see that both of them were going to be in the bed together. Okay, it's called bedfellows. So of course, the other Axis power is Hirohito. He is the Emperor of Japan. And they are focusing on Manchuria and China. And of course, what they're looking for are resources. Oil, minerals, food. Japan is landlocked. I mean, not landlocked, I'm sorry, it's an island. But it's small. It needs to get these resources. One of the main reasons for Pearl Harbor. Why does Japan attack Pearl Harbor? Well, they're mad at America because later on we take away, we used to sell them oil and metals. And we quit doing that when we kind of align with the Allies. And that ticks them off. It's one of the reasons they do that. But it attacks Manchuria, mineral-rich part of eastern China. And then, of course, the prime minister who acts as the military guy in Japan is going to be Hideki Tojo. So what's going to happen later on after the war is Hirohito is going to say, I knew nothing of what was going on. I'm the civilian leader. Tojo is going to go on trial. Right here's Tojo in trial. They have the Nuremberg trials for the European front and then for the Japanese front. And I think it's in Tokyo. They have two separate trials. All right? So we're going to stop there. Yep, we're going to stop right there for today and pick that up. But those are the things leading into World War II.